So cryptocurrencies, what's the difference with no, the normal fiat currencies that we know? First of all, they don't exist anywhere. Okay, so if I tell you that on my phone, I have 1 Bitcoin, and now I'm sending you 1 Bitcoin, right? Nothing really leaves my phone, nothing arrives on your phone. Okay, cryptocurrency, they don't really exist anywhere. There's not such a thing like 1 Bitcoin. It doesn't exist anywhere. The only thing that exists is a global ledger where all the transactions are registered. Okay, so if you forget for a second about all the cash that you know, all the coins, all the banknotes, and you just reason about the bank accounts that you have, and you think that every transaction you do with another person, you do it with the wire transfers, that's exactly how cryptocurrency work. They don't have any physical presence. Money moves from one account to another, which is basically just transactions in the ledger that is normally held by a bank, right? In this case, is a distributed ledger that is really not in the hands of anybody. Nobody has particular powers on it. Like a bank, if they want, they can freeze transaction, they can revert transaction, they can steal money if they want from your bank account, which happened. But in the case of crypto, this ledger is distributed in thousands of computers all around the world, and nobody has the power to undo a transaction, to revert the transaction, or to change anything that is in the blockchain. Okay, it's an immutable ledger shared globally. Okay, but this is an important concept. Cryptocurrency doesn't exist anywhere on any device, which then creates a problem. If you want to seize money, right? Because if we come back with the example of fiat, okay, it's easy to confiscate a bag full of cash, right? But what about bank accounts? Okay, then you have a central institution, you have a bank, they can freeze the money. Now, in the case of cryptocurrency, unless, as we will see, is held by exchanges, but is in the hand of a person, you cannot really compel them to give you the money. You cannot freeze that money, all right? You have to find something, as we will see, which is called a private key, which allows you to take possession of the money. Okay, maybe now this is working. I told you about this already. So cryptocurrencies was seen as a problem by law enforcement when it came into place and got discovered by criminals, who were the first one to use cryptocurrency in their illicit activity as a new technology. Often criminals are one of the first to exploit it. In these 14 years, since 2010, but 15 since 2009, when cryptocurrency started, we have seen more and more that rather than a problem for law enforcement, it's actually, let's not say a solution, but something that you can really use to help your investigation. Why? Because every transaction that is done in cryptocurrency is registered on this thing called the blockchain. You might have heard this word. The blockchain is nothing more than this ledger that contains all the transactions ever done with a certain crypto. Okay? And everything is there transparently available to everybody. You don't need, court order. You don't need to write an MLA to another country. You just connect with your computer. You can see each and every transaction ever done. Which is the problem? There are no identities there. But there are then techniques to go beyond this veil of pseudonymity, let's say, and get an attribution. Now, I just want to show you how investigative techniques change in these 15 years. Okay, first of all, at the very beginning, there was Bitcoin only. For the first 3-4 years, there were no other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin was the only one. And what you can see on the blockchain, so this ledger that I told you, is what you see here on the screen. You can see the sender of a transaction, the receiver of a transaction. But as you see, there are no names, no entities. You just see the addresses that are sending the money and the addresses that are receiving the money. And at the time, there were only blockchain explorers. So what you see here is a screenshot from a blockchain explorer, something that lets you have a look at the blockchain. But this is the kind of information you have, nothing more, right? Then in 2012, 2013, a first tool was made available. And I'm happy to say this is from a friend of mine, an Italian guy, Michele Spagnolo, that for his master thesis, he created this software. The software was called bit-iodine that made available the blockchain to everyone, extracting data from it. So in this case, he was able to show the path from one address to another. And also, he was the first one to come with the concept of clustering. So clustering is at the basis of every crypto investigation that you would do nowadays, and at the basis of all the software that is used nowadays, which is the idea. There are millions of addresses used by all the people in the world making transactions, right? But they are independent and single addresses, millions of them, tens of millions of them. If you want to de-anonymize them one by one, that would be a daunting task. It's too much, right? But if you find a way to cluster together addresses, so for example, an exchange, they own hundreds of thousands of different addresses. They're controlled by one single entity. So if you're able to understand how one entity owns those 100,000 of addresses, you have much more chances of de-anonymize this transaction. Even a single person can easily own hundreds of addresses. Okay, unlike the bank where you have maybe one bank account, two bank accounts, with crypto, automatically your wallet will create more and more addresses. So a person might have hundreds or thousands of addresses. And this concept of clustering allows software to say, okay, if Federico owns this particular address, 1B, C, whatever, he also owns this one and this one and this one. Okay, so he's able to tell you he owns all this money in all these addresses. Okay, and we'll make it available. But I will show you later how it's done. Then in 2014, 13, 14, Ethereum came into place. Is another cryptocurrency with a different scripting language, more evoluted, allowed for things that you might have heard, smart contracts, which is basically, to say it in easy words, is a transaction with some built-in conditions. So this transaction will happen if this happens, okay? Or if this condition doesn't happen, something else will be done with the transaction. So you can put conditions to a transaction happening at a certain moment for certain conditions, and also automatically without any human intervention. Okay, this is Ethereum. That allowed what I told you before. So smart contracts, NFTs, another word that you might have heard. I will say this in a few words later. So at this moment in time, the only thing that was available for investigations was what I showed you before, Blockchain Explorer. And then you had to manually create a graph like this. So this is an example of an investigation where money started from here. We're trying to follow the money until, as we will see later, we reach the final stage of the investigation, which is to understand where the money is sitting right now. So this is the aim of every crypto investigation. You started with certain sum, which is in an address, and you follow it until you find that it's sitting in an address like this, unspent. This is in a bank account, or it reaches an exchange. Why the exchange? Because as I will tell you in more details later, when the money reaches an exchange, then it's something where we can get an identity. Why? Because the exchanges nowadays are forced by the Financial Action Task Force and by other regulations to do KYC of their clients. Okay, back in 2013, 14, when I opened an account with an exchange, I could have called myself Mickey Mouse, or they would have not cared. They just wanted an email address. Okay, but could be Mickey Mouse at gmail.com was fine. No identification, no checks, nothing was done. Nowadays, open an account with an exchange is like opening a bank account. Okay, they will ask you for all your documents. They will also make 3D scans of your face. So you have to do like embarrassing things like standing and scanning your face or reading out loud words that they tell you just to prevent deep fakes, which happens anyway. Nowadays also is really a topic that came out in the last few months. There are these AI tools that they scan your face, they scan your voice, and then they can make videos of yourself saying whatever you want, or also of a third person. right? So scary stuff. Anyway, after Ethereum, then other things were possible. So smart contracts, I told you already about, but also different kind of tokens. So other cryptocurrencies built on Ethereum, and also NFTs. You might have heard about this word, but maybe you don't know exactly what it is. NFT stands for non-fungible tokens. What is the difference with other other kind of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin? Bitcoin is fungible, or Ethereum is fungible, in the sense that if I have to pay you 1 Bitcoin, you don't really care which Bitcoin I give you, right? So you just want to receive 1 Bitcoin, like €1. For you, it doesn't really make any difference if I give you one specific coin or another, because they are all equal. NFTs, non-fungible, means that a specific coin is attached to a real-world asset, which could be, for example, a painting. And another coin is associated to another painting. So, of course, they are different, right? So for you, it makes a difference which coins I give you, because it will represent a different painting or a different contract or a different asset, whatever, right? Those are NFTs. They can even represent just pictures. They can represent whatever you may want to give an identity attached to it. And they are exchanged in this way on this ledger of Ethereum, in this case, not the Bitcoin ledger. And everything, as I told you, is readable online. Now, before I continue with the with some examples, I just also want to warn you about one thing, something that we call time gap. And I like to make this analogy. So, for example, you know that when you look at stars, you're effectively looking back in time, because that light took maybe billions of years to reach you. So maybe, this very nice star here doesn't even exist anymore, because that's the picture that the light emitted maybe 10 billions of years ago. Even the sun, if the sun for any reason is going to disappear, for like 8 minutes, we will not see any difference. The light is still coming to us. And that's the same thing for all the cases that maybe I will explain or that you may hear in the news, on the web. We are effectively looking back in time. That's the modus operandi of criminals 2-3 years ago, because by the time the crime happened, then it's investigated, prosecuted, and then it reached court. Then we are looking at what happened back in time. But this is a very fast evolving field. Like, probably like many criminals would do the same thing in other fields, but in crypto, the evolution is really fast. And so we also have to take into account that there are always new methods of laundering the money through crypto. Okay, let's have a look at investigations. So what is possible with crypto? I mean, you hear all the time that they are anonymous, it's impossible to investigate it, it's impossible to get behind those addresses and transactions to real identities. In reality, what we have seen in all the cases that have been successfully prosecuted so far, with, I can tell you, the biggest seizure ever done in the United States, in the entire history of the United States, is in crypto. They seized $3.8 billion worth of crypto in a very interesting investigation. And if I have the time, I will tell you a bit more about it. But is it possible to go behind those pseudonyms and get to the identity of criminals, to trace and visualize all those transactions, and also to use tools to make a report out of what you find in the blockchain? Okay, let's start with the first one, identification. So how do you do that? First of all, you have seen the graph that I showed you before. I'll show you other graphs later. But those graphs allow investigators to understand and make a first distinction. Okay, so when you want to investigate and then later to seize crypto assets, you have to understand if you're investigating hosted or unhosted wallets. What's the difference, so that we know? Hosted means cryptocurrency is not in the hands of the criminals, our suspects, but is deposited or kept with a service. Okay, and this is a very important concept. In this case, it could be an exchange, it could be a custodian, okay, which usually is how you would hold your cryptocurrency. With an exchange, just consider like a bank. Okay, you use an exchange to go from fiat to crypto, but then you can decide to use it as a bank and leave your money there. what's the difference between hosted and unhosted? Unhosted would mean is not with the service, is in the hand and control of the criminal. Which is the difference? As I will show you later, your cryptocurrencies are controlled by something which is called a private key. Okay, and I don't want to go into complicated details, but just to let you understand, if I have cryptocurrency in my phone, let's imagine I have my phone with my wallet and I have 2 Bitcoins. Okay, when I want to spend it, I need to use, or my phone, my wallet will use it for me, something which is called a private key, which is a sort of password that allows my wallet to prove to the system and to everybody receiving the transaction that I'm the lawful owner of that money, I have it, and now I'm spending it and transferring the ownership to you or to someone else, right? It's just a string of numbers, just like a password. It's called a private key. I will show it to you on the screen later. Who's holding this private key? If it's this case, is the criminal itself. So since to take possession, to seize, and then to confiscate crypto assets, I need to find that private key to send this money to a control address from the law enforcement. To initiate the transaction, I have to find this thing called the private key. Where do I look for? In this case, with the suspect itself. Okay, this private key can be in different places. I will show them later. Or with the service. So hosted means is with the service. It's like, if you want to seize money from me, cash, fiat, right? If I have it with a bank, you don't check that money, you don't look for that money in my house, you go to the bank, you ask the bank to seize it. In this case, if I have cryptocurrency with a service, so it's hosted, you go to this service, you subpoena the service, and you ask them to freeze the account and to send them to a control address from the law enforcement. Let's start with unhosted. Okay, so the criminal, they were selling drugs, they were receiving payments in Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other crypto, and now they are having it. Okay, they have the private keys. So just to tell you what are the private keys, those are private keys. As I told you before, it's just a string of numbers. Just think about it as a password to unlock your money. Okay, so my wallet, anytime I want to move my crypto, we'll take this private key, which is stored inside, we'll use it to send the transaction. All right, so what I have to find to seize the money is to find this private key, because then I can use software to initiate the transaction, move the assets from the address controlled by the criminal, and send it to an address that I control. Okay, that's the first step, and it's really important. I will repeat this later, because it's one of the things that most of the law enforcement misunderstand. They're not securing the evidence, they're not securing the assets, because they're not taking this step of moving the cryptocurrency away from where it is right now. Where do you find this private key? Remember, we are talking about unhosted wallet. Okay, it's not with the service, it's in the control of the criminal. First of all, desktop or mobile wallet. So the most common way to hold cryptocurrency on your phone. So you might have an application on the phone. There are literally hundreds of them. So one of the first things, if I know that a suspect of mine might be using cryptocurrency, I think he owns it, I would see his laptop, his phone, every hardware capable of holding a file like a private key, or having this kind of software. Okay, these are all wallets available for phones, on mobile phones. Also, web wallet. What is a web wallet? It's the same thing as a wallet on your phone, but is with a service. So in this case, the software will be the interface between your phone and the service provider, but can give an indication that this person is holding the money somewhere. Now, I would really challenge any of my former colleagues with the financial police, if they are doing a search at the house of a suspect, looking for money, and they find any of those things, I'm curious to know how many would take those into account, they would probably think it's a USB stick or a funny card, or I don't know, what kind of whatever device you may think it is. Those are hardware wallets, which is, by the way, the most secure way to hold cryptocurrencies. It's just a tiny machine. You then attach it to a computer to initiate the transaction, but literally they can be billions of dollars in a tiny machine like that. Okay, and very easy to hide, very easy to carry around. So if you want to smuggle money, super easy. And as I will show you, it's even easier because you don't even have to take this machine with you. The only thing you need to take is 12 words. So every time you create a wallet, you initialize a wallet on your phone or on a machine like this, you will be prompted with usually 12 or 24 words that you write down, and they constitute the backup of the wallet that you created. So if I'm a very clever criminal, now I generated millions of dollars now with selling drugs online, I send the money to a machine like this, okay, which I initiated, and I initialize it, I was prompted those words. No, if I'm very smart, I can even remember it, which is not my case, but 12 words, you can remember it. Then you destroy the machine, and then you can travel the world. You can move from one jurisdiction from another. Law enforcement can come to your house and do a search. They won't find anything. Okay, the only thing keeping that money safe is 12 words. Any moment when I cross to another jurisdiction or investigation is over, they didn't find anything, what I do, I buy again one of these machines, I insert the 12 words, my entire wallet is recreated there. And I have access again to the money that is on the blockchain. Okay, very easy from a criminal point of view. From an investigative point of view, you need to be aware. That's the key. And most of the law enforcement are not. So they would easily dismiss any of those. Or a list of 12 words. What's the meaning of it? Who knows? So law enforcement must be aware in case there is suspicion of the involvement of money laundering through cryptocurrencies, of what you have to look for. There's even paper wallets. So what is a paper wallet? It's just a piece of paper where two important pieces of information are written, which is the address. So you remember, as I told you before, if you send cryptocurrency from one person to another, it goes from one address to another. Basically, it's like your bank account, like your IBAN. And the private key, which is what allows you to move the money that is in that specific address. And also something that I'm asked often, each and every address has one private key. Okay, so every address, one private key. So if you have a private key, we'll unlock the money contained in one address, one specific address, and that only. Okay? And there is also a link between the two, which I won't go into the detail, but it's through mathematical function called hashing. You cannot really change that password. Okay, so one address. So this is this address 14SSC, etc., as this private key, and that only. Nobody can really change it because there is a mathematical function connecting the two. And also another place where law enforcement would look for the private keys, cloud services. Now, the investigation I told you before, the biggest seizure ever done in the US, $3.8 billion in crypto. Where were the private keys? In a cloud service. So they were not on the computer on the suspect, they were not on the phone, they were not anywhere where the law enforcement could have found them. They were in the cloud. So in that case, law enforcement were skilled enough to look at the computer of the suspect, look for cloud services used, which wouldn't tell you immediately which are the files that are there, but they could subpoena the service, get the file that were stored in the cloud service, and get access to the private keys for $3.8 billion. Okay, so something to take into account. During an investigation, you may want to look for cloud services and to understand what's there. Okay, when it's hosted, so as I told you, in most of the investigation, our target is there are these anonymous transactions that we see on the blockchain. We follow them until they reach a known entity that can be subpoenaed to get information about the owner of the specific account. Now you would say, but no, that's too easy. So you just follow why criminals would do that. So you just follow the transaction, then you reach Binance, you subpoena Binance, they will tell you who's the person behind it. In this phase here, so in the transaction leading to the exchange, they would implement some techniques, which is, I will show you in a few seconds, the use of mixers, of swaps, or bridges, or things that make it more difficult to investigate it, so that they are confident that the moment they get to the exchange, you will not be able to trace and make the match between the account with the exchange and the criminal activity. Also, another thing that is really important to understand is that when you're tracing money, you stop tracing when you reach an exchange. So if you're using whatever service and you're following transactions on the blockchain, you reach, like in the example I made before, Binance, you stop tracing. Even if on the blockchain you would see there is a following transaction or the following transaction, you stop. Why? Because let's make the example of Alice, the name always used in this kind of explanations. Alice has an account with Binance, with an exchange, right? She deposits 1 Bitcoin. Binance will tell her, yes, deposit this Bitcoin in the address BC1QJ9, right? Now, after 1 month, she wants to withdraw that Bitcoin because she wants to spend it somewhere else. You would expect the money is coming from this address. In reality, it's like a bank. So the money goes in a pool, and when you want to withdraw the money, they take whatever $100 bill they have available. It's the same thing for an exchange. The money will come probably from BC1QDD2, another address, okay? Money goes in a pool. When you want to withdraw, they will give you, since it's fungible, they will give you whatever Bitcoin they have available to give to you. Okay, so if you follow this transaction, this is probably going to a third party which has nothing to do with the criminal activity. So you will follow a false lead. That's why you always stop. The exchange will be able to tell you how they use the transaction inside them. So they will be able to tell you, Alice, after she deposited 1 Bitcoin, when she withdrew, we send the money to, and they will tell you which address she used to receive the money. Now, what those services are able to provide to law enforcement as information? Of course, the entire transaction history, the IP address of the person logging into the account, of course, easy to spoof with VPNs or proxies, so not reliable. But a lot of cases that we've seen in crypto, even the most skilled criminals, they always make one mistake. So it's always worth analyzing this information. Why? Because VPNs and proxies, sometimes they have glitches. So 1,000 times they were connected to the service anonymously. Only one time in 1,000, for a reason the system didn't work, they exposed the real IP address. They can provide you 2-factor authentication, which usually leads to a phone, so a phone number, okay, which can lead to an identity. The machine configuration, which is also something important. Every time you connect to a service using your computer, you leave a specific fingerprint that is unique. It's based on the operating system, the version, the browser, the version of the browser, etc. And is the moment you seize the computer of a suspect, you can make a match between the fingerprint of that computer that you're seizing with the computer that initiated the transaction. So you can prove this is the computer that initiated that asked the service to make this transaction. And also, of course, all the trade history. In case of individuals, they will be able to give law enforcement the KYC information acquired at the moment of the onboarding, selfies, proof of residency. Usually they are utility bills, banking details for the sending of the fiat or receiving of the fiat after these transactions. In the case of company, very important stuff like incorporation documents, beneficial ownership, and again, banking details. One thing, if you will ever be involved in writing to an exchange, maybe for a client, if you're a lawyer or as law enforcement, it's really easy to make your to ask a question that they are not able to understand. So there is a very specific terminology in crypto. Sometimes it's difficult to understand or to get confident with, but do your homework, because otherwise, I've seen this a lot of time. From the other side, they don't even understand the question. Okay, if you mix an address with an account with a private key, they will not be able to help you because they don't understand the question. Also, you've seen those private keys and those addresses are very long string of numbers. You can easily make a mistake if you want to type it. So you're watching at the PDF that you sent, and now you want to type it. So usually we always send this information in TXT or doc files from which you can copy paste. And also, those exchanges have departments that are dedicated to assist in law enforcement. They have, investigative departments, and they have, compliance departments. And they really encourage people to, law enforcement, to take informal steps before, so informal contacts. They can even take actions before receiving a subpoena or court order to freeze an account or to provide information. They are able to assist law enforcement at the very early stage, freezing the account, which will not be tipped off to the client, but just claiming glitches in the system or need for some KYC. They will stop the account for some days until they wait for the formal subpoena. Stop checking at the VASP. I told you already why. What goes in is not the same that goes out. And also, not necessarily if you have a suspect depositing $1 million with an exchange, doesn't necessarily mean he bought crypto. I can use it as a bank. I can send money to an exchange, keep it there, travel in the world, and then withdraw the money somewhere else without touching crypto. Okay, so it's not necessarily that they acquire crypto. So you want to ask in a request all the if then. So if he deposited money, yes or no. But did he convert it in crypto, yes or no? Is it still in crypto, yes or no? And in each case, you want to tell which are the actions that you want them to take. Now go to visualize. I just want to show you a couple of examples on the real blockchain so you can see what we are talking about. This is a case that happened a few days ago, 3 of May. A person lost, but I will tell you, didn't lose at the end because they were recovered, $68 million in a scam. It's not a scam, it's some sort of fraud. What happened is called address poisoning. It's a bit complicated, but I will try to make it very simple. The moment you want to make a transaction, especially if it's a lot of money, and since you're sending money to a string of number, the first thing you want to do is maybe a test transaction. So this was the victim. This is in Ethereum. This is the victim. He wanted to send money to this address that he controlled. Okay, 0xD9A, and this is how it ended. All right, so he makes a test transaction. You see the 3 of May, 9:14 in the morning. He sent 0.0005 Ethereum. What happened then? You see that everything is working correctly. Then he goes back to the chronology of his transaction, copies again that address, send the rest of the money, which is $68 million. This money is not arriving. He goes back and checks. The transaction happened. What was the problem? When he looks back, usually addresses are displayed in this way, just for simplicity, the beginning and the end of the address. What criminals are doing nowadays more and more often is that they create addresses that resemble the address that you want to send money to. If you see this one, and you look at this one, they have the same beginning, the same end. In between, everything is completely different, right? So what the criminal did, he saw this guy with a very wealthy address was sending a test transaction to this address. So if you make a test, means then you will send the rest. So he quickly creates an address which is very similar. He sends a tiny transaction, in this case was 0 point something, to the victim. So this is the last in the chronology. When the victim goes back to the address, to the wallet, okay, let me send the 68 million. He takes the last transaction. Maybe he also double checks. Okay, the beginning and the end are those. So that's my address. He sends the money. In reality, he's sending the money to the criminal. Is it clear on what he did? Okay, so he sent $68 million. that then started being laundered. In this case was raw Bitcoins, is another crypto. It has a nice, happy ending, this investigation, because from one point of view, because since we labeled immediately this transaction, so the criminal find that I cannot really cash out. Whatever exchange I go to, since they're using Crystal or any other service, they will be able to tell this is dirty money. They will not accept. Maybe they will even alert law enforcement. So what he did, he went back to the victim, saying, you know what, if you give me, we don't know exactly the sum, but probably 5%, 10%, I will send you back the money, which is what they did. So they made this thing. He never then went to the police, and the thing ended up in this way. But this is a very common scam that is happening now in the recent weeks. Another way for criminals to launder the money, to make it difficult to trace it, swaps. Now, I won't go into too many details, but this is FTX was an exchange that was it was defrauding basically all the clients, went bankrupt. During the bankruptcy process, money was stolen from FTX, and the criminal, we are able to follow all the transactions that the criminal did on the blockchain. Started swapping this money through other cryptocurrencies, from Ethereum to other crypto, USDT, stable coins, etc. And then we are still following the money. Still, the investigation is ongoing. And finally, the last thing I want to tell you, mixers. You might maybe know this word. Mixers is a way to mix your cryptocurrency with the cryptocurrency of other people. Okay, so you deposit money with a service. As I told you, the moment the money enters a service, is mixed with the money of other people. Then the moment you withdraw it, is impossible to understand, or should be impossible to understand, what belongs to whom, right? But with the good tools and a lot of manual work and a bit of reasoning about it, you're able to do it. This is Tornado Cash, is one of the most famous decentralized mixers. Now is under sanctions by OFAC, so the transaction going through it would not be accepted by any service. But in this case, we were able to demix it. Why? Because mixing is done in this way. If I want to launder 211 Ethereum in this case, this 211 is broken in pieces, in buckets. The Tornado Cash has a bucket for 100, 10, and 1. So I make all these deposits, and then the Tornado Cash will send back the money to me randomly. So it's very difficult to trace it. Unless, with a lot of manual work, you're able to make a correlation, with the time of a transaction, and also the fact that these 4 transactions went to the same exiting address, you're able effectively to demix this money. But it's a lot of manual work. But just to tell you that when you hear the mixing is, mixers are completely anonymous, that's not true. There's work that can be done. And I conclude here. You will have the material. There's just a couple of slides. Any question before we go?